All right, hey folks, thanks for taking a moment to watch this video. This is getting started with PreTeXt in October 2023. And so to get started, first things first, I would suggest that you head towards pretextbook.org. And what we're going to work through today is under the documentation, there is the PreTeXt guide. If you click that, you can see it's a really large, it's a community effort to try and get as much of this documented as best as we can for everybody. What I want to point you to is the Getting Started tutorial, which is what we're going to talk through today. If you're not familiar with PreTeXt, I'm going to assume that you're somewhat familiar with PreTeXt, what it is. Maybe you've never written it before. But if you're interested in learning about why PreTeXt, the philosophy, and all that good stuff, that first chapter there is great for that. But we're going to work through the Getting Started tutorial to kind of get you up and running very quickly and without having to install anything. In order to pull that off, we're going to use GitHub. We're going to use a service on GitHub called GitHub Codespaces. It's going to install everything onto a virtual computer that you just use your web browser. At the end of the day, it's basically like you go to Overleaf for writing LaTeX. You would use the GitHub Codespace for writing your PreTeXt in your web browser. And so let's go ahead and to use GitHub. First of all, what is GitHub? It's owned by Microsoft. It's a website. There are other things that you can use to share your PreTeXt books using Git with the world, but what we like about GitHub is that it has a VS Code built in, and that's what we're going to use with our code space. All this said, you click here for github.com/signup, and it'll walk you through the steps in order to create your new free account. And one other thing I want to throw out there, you don't have to wait for this to be approved, but go ahead and head on to education.github.com. And if you go to education.github.com, you can request, you got to be signed in to do that. So I'll go through my own account here. You can request free teacher benefits. And so if you are a professor or a researcher or a teacher of any kind, then you can get the free pro features at no cost to you. So free GitHub teams and free pro features and all that good stuff. Basically, it just means you get a few more extra resources before you get the email from GitHub saying you're using too much of their resources, which I have yet to hear anybody in the community besides myself hit that limit, because I know I'd create a lot of PreTeXt projects more so than other folks. So yeah, for you to get started, you don't have to wait for that, but I would go ahead and request it if you're eligible. Alrighty, so moving forward, I want to make sure that we understand three different things that we're going to work with today. There's the github.dev code space. So whenever you're at a URL that says github.dev, usually it's like your username dash random words dash some letters and numbers github.dev. That is a code spaces URL. It is private to you. It has all the PreTeXt software installed for you and managed for you automatically. And that's where you do your work. That's where you do your authoring. Then you're going to share the source with the rest of the world through your github.com repository. That's also where you can save, like permanently commit your changes, save your changes to the github.com service, so that even if your code space gets deleted, because they get deleted every so often, you still have all your source files. You can still recreate your code space from that github.com repository. And that's also what you can share with other members of the community if you want to get support help from the PreTeXt support Google group. Speaking of which, let's just go ahead and shout out PreTeXt support Google group. That's the first thing to join if you're interested, is join the Google group at groups.google.com/g/PreTeXt support, or just Google for PreTeXt support. You should be able to find it. And that is the forum, that's the email, newsletter, whatever you want to call it, where you can have conversations and get help with anything related to PreTeXt. All right, and if you want to participate in that, it's really helpful if you could share your github.com repository. I'll point that out to you in a second. And then finally, we're going to show you how to deploy your book, the final built version of your textbook or whatever document you're trying to write, to the github.io GitHub Pages service. And all that's free as part of your GitHub account. And we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to create your repository, your code space. We're going to go to this link here. And if you're logged in, and I like to use dark mode, so your window might look differently if you have a light mode set up. But you're going to go here, and there's going to be this green button that says use this template. And we're going to create a new repository. So you're going to create a new repository. And so it's going to create from that template. You don't need to include all branches. In fact, the only two decisions you have to make is what's your repository name going to be? It's going to be my getting started PreTeXt, just some identifier. You can change this later if you want. This is going to be October 2023. So you can name it whatever you want. The other decision you can make, github.com repositories. They can be public or they can be private. I highly encourage you to keep yours public, however. I know people sometimes are a little bit self-conscious about sharing their rough drafts with the world, but if you want help from the community, like if you're trying to get something to work in your PreTeXt book, easiest thing to do is just to share a link to your github.com repository. And if you do that, if it's public, it's going to be way easier to get help with that than if you have a private one where you have to actually add people to give them access to it. So highly encourage you to keep it public. You can make it private if you want. Even if you have a private repository, you could still create your github.io GitHub pages deployment, and that will be available to the public. So we're going to click that. It's going to take just a few seconds. I'll be right back when that's done. All right, it really was just a few seconds, but here we are. This is my github.com repository. I know I'm there because it's the github.com URL. My username is Stephen Klontz, and then getting started, PreTeXt, whatever I called it, that's right there. This is the link that I can share this with anybody. I can copy this because I made it a public repository. I can share that link with the rest of the PreTeXt community. So here's what the site looks like in light mode, and has all the source files in it. Now, what I want to do is actually be able to edit the book, build the book into a useful HTML version. To do that, I'm going to go here to the code, and I'm going to create, by clicking the Code Spaces tab, I'm going to create a code space on main. All right, it's going to do another setup process. Now, this one actually is going to take a little bit longer. To copy from the template took like 10 seconds maybe. Here, when we're setting up the code space, you click the view logs if you're kind of curious to see that it's actually working. This will probably take about a minute or two. And this is actually what it's doing is it's creating a virtual computer with all the software that you would normally have to install yourself on your own computer to run PreTeXt. This is basically doing it somewhere on one of Microsoft's servers on the internet that you can just get to using your web browser. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording again, and I'll be right back when that's all done.